So, as announced in my Monday video, Lorenz Gadient will be visiting our place right now, actually, from Sunday to Friday. If you don't know who Lorenz Gadient is, there is a playlist on my channel where I have some interviews with him. But Lorenz is the author of the book Takt und Pendelschlag. It's published in 2010 at Katspiegler. Katspiegler is one of the most known musicology publishers actually. So, and I often say that book might be one of the most, if not the most important musicology publication of the first decades of the 21st century. I'm not saying this in an ironical way, but I'm serious. That book, totally ignored, or almost totally ignored, has aspects of a completely lost performance practice based on a reconstruction of historical tempi. I shouldn't repeat that. You all know what I'm talking about, and if you watch the channel a little bit longer, you will know, and you will be realizing what the importance of tempo is for a performance. So reconstructing historical tempi is really one of the things that we should dedicate way more time in the historically informed performance practice, and maybe in all performance practices whatsoever. Anyway, that book, if you read German, it's still worthwhile reading. Nevertheless, Lorenz has, in the 9 years that lie between the publication of that book and today, has found a lot of new, I would say, proofs or convincing elements for the whole beat practice. And of course, all of that combined with the fact that that book is rather hard to read. It's a very in-depth written book, but very theoretically written. So all of that combined, the time has come for a complete new edition, and not just a translation in English, but a completely newly rewritten book that will be way more complete, not only on a theoretical field, but also on a practical side than the 2010 book was. In a way, if we succeed in what we plan to do, you could say that the 2010 publication was a kind of upstep for what we are doing now. So I spent a lot of time working on the index, so the content of the book, writing out the chapters or the titles. Once that's done, then the book is written, because then the only thing we need to do is just write the chapters, and some of those keynote chapters already have been written. So it's not that we have to start completely from scratch, and a lot of information we can just subtract or detract, how do you say that, from the 2010 book and just rework it a little bit. So the chances are that once we are finished with the content description, that the book will take 6 or 7 or 8 months, I don't know, but can be finalized in that amount of time. I will not go too much into detail, but to just give you an idea of how we are going to set up everything, we'll have several chapters, several sections, so to say, that will guide you or the reader in reading the book, and also in going step by step through the process of accepting or just realizing or just visualizing the idea of the whole beat practice. I'm saying this because it's important that the book will be a mind-opening book and not closing minds. And you all know, certainly if you read some reaction on the channel of people who are new to the whole beat practice, it's very normal and natural when people are presented with an idea that sounds radical in a way that in a way that if that idea is true, then a lot of things change, combined with the lack of a certain group pressure. I would say there is the opposite. If it's true, there is a group pressure not to accept this or not to go into detail into this whole beat practice because of fear, because people realize very soon that if this is true, it has an enormous impact on the way we perform music that we all like, and so we are emotionally connected to the music that we perform, and also we are actually more connected to the way we perform that music than perhaps to the original music as well. But that's the same thing. So once you realize that, it's important. And with this book, of course, that's of prime importance, that when people take this book, from the first paragraph that they read, that initial confrontation is taken away as much as possible. And so there will be a large introduction chapter or section with several chapters that will guide people through the process of thinking and realizing why this could be important. So not just throwing the idea at them, but just slowly, step by step, introducing them into the idea of whole beat practice. So that will be a large section. So then you will have a second section which will be very deep theoretically description of this description chapters on, well, the theoretical background of the whole beat practice. You will find a large section on what's actually the only thing you would need to understand, which is the historic position of the terms Takt and Schlag. So Takt in the sense of time, tempo, Zeitmaß, not only in the sense of bar, and Schlag, the principle of the up and down. If you know those two terms, if you can position them historically correct, the terminology, so then there's nothing else you need to know. That's all you need to know. It's actually very simple. Then a large chapter on what Lorenz called the Sekundenzeitmaß. So that's the mesure d'un seconde in French. In English, you would say the time of 1 second, but the time in the sense of tempo, the definition of the tempo second. So it's very controversial if I present it to you like that, 1 second equals 2 seconds, which is of course not the case. But the way people defined in history the 1 second, so the tempo ordinario tempo, was by a pendulum that moved back and forth 2 seconds, and the 2 seconds together formed the periodic unity, the definition of the tempo of 1 second. So it's of course not 1 second in time duration equals 2 seconds in time duration. It's a little bit what people like Mealing ridiculed, like, how is possible 1 second is 1 second? Yeah, but it's of course the mesure d'un seconde. And that will be an extensive chapter, also followed by some 40 historical quotes that actually say the same thing. So we need a little bit there the number of information, facts, of quotes to make you realize this is really a thing. So, and will be some other things like tempo ordinario notation will be in there. Then we have a section with keynote chapters, which are important chapters. I will refer to these theoretical chapters, but really in depth, like on Mersenne, on Hotteterre, some other things. So we have a list of keynote, like if you will have a symposium, you have also their keynote lectures. So they last an hour instead of 20 minutes. These chapters will be perhaps 30 or 40 pages instead of 10. The next section will be a step down, surrounding chapters, where, for instance, we present things that are important, but we will not, we cannot write 40 pages of every subject, right? For instance, if I refer to a video, like the source on Louis Danel will be one of those 15 to 20 page subjects or chapters. So you see keynote chapters a little bit under that. And then we will have even a step more down, like the 15-minute reads. Those chapters are articles that you could compare with the Wednesday videos that I make. So little snapshots of history, presenting a specific detailed element. For instance, the story on Mozart, Fink, Don Giovanni, could be one of those. And so that you have different levels. If you really want to go in depth and theoretically, it's there for you. If you want to know, to learn to understand why this is important, why this might be even true, then there is the introduction chapters. If you just have 15 minutes time and just want to be, with a glass of wine Sunday evening, Christmas time, the book is there for you to give you 50 minutes. Articles. All the articles, by the way, will be standalone. They will refer to each other in the book, but you could actually also think on publishing them separately. This will enable us to write the book rather quickly, because if you want to write a book from A to Z fully as a whole, that's another thing, and I don't think it's necessary. I don't think either that's something of our time. People generally do not read books from the first letter to the last letter, but having the option and giving you the option of just going through the book from this chapter to that chapter and never lose your way, that's actually the plan. And then we will have some final sections, a how-to section, where very practically we guide you through how do you read the notation of Bach. What's tempo ordinario in Mozart's music? Why do composers use 30-second notes in an adagio section if they want to have it played slow, and so on. So very practically, to teach you a little bit from the notation side most of the times. The last section will be an important one as well, some data that we present. So list of metronome numbers that are not easy to find. We will work on a database online also with metronome numbers that will be accessible to everyone. But in the book it's very handy if you're just playing a Mozart sonata, that all the metronome numbers we have at this moment are there. Also a list of historical quotes where the metronome number is described as an actual tempo indication of a composer, not something, we might end up with 50 or 100 quotes. Also there we need the number to not only impress, but to make our case very strong. And no better way to make your case than to dive into the historical sources and just give the information as it's presented there. So, and several of those data sheets, you would say, would be transferred into a kind of table that you could, you take the book from the shelf and you have the information there. When will this be published? The aim is in the middle of the Beethoven year 2020, and it will have something as a title. Lorenz came up with a beautiful title, in German, Die Entfesselten Klassiker, which means something like the unleashed classic composer. It's difficult to translate. I had some contact with some friends in the United States who gave some, hints. But Klassiker in German refers more to the classic composer era around 1800 than you would have in English. So, but the title will be this, and perhaps we should illustrate it in the cover as well. So this idea of de-industrialization of the composer, or maybe the empowerment, if that's an English word, of the original emotional power of those compositions, something like that, so that you have this positive outburst of energy that will be made possible by the application of this whole beat practice. So I'm looking forward to writing this. I'm really happy that I spent so much of my time lately just thinking on this, writing that. It's hard, sitting there. The first chapters, of course, are very easy, but then finding a structure, and at the end it's very simple. But I'm happy that I've done this, and I hope that by the time this video is online, Lorenz and I have been sitting together for 3 days, that he is still very happy with this. I hope so, and I'm looking forward to writing this together with him. And this will enable us also not to explain the things that we are doing, but just give the book. It's all there. So leave me in the comments what your thoughts are. If you have titles for the book, leave them also in the comment. I will be reading those. And yeah, That's why that's where we, Lorenz and I, will be working on in the coming months, very hard. Of course, I update you once in a while on this writing process. Okay, thanks for being here. Thanks for subscribing. Also, thank you for my patrons. And if you haven't heard of our Patreon page, that's the link is in the description box. That's a page where you can support the things we are doing, even with $1 a month. But it's an important thing for me because my patrons, they just knowing that they are there, they give me the energy to not go through one wall, two walls, but through a bunch of walls. And I promise you, and you know this already, will have to do that. So thank you all for being here, and see you soon again.